Hello, I'm Sophia Bennett, 35 years old, dwelling independently in my oceanside villa nestled along Captiva Island, Florida. That particular Thursday evening, I had just concluded my customary lone evening meal when the entrance bell echoed unexpectedly through the quiet space. Upon opening it, I was stunned to find my complete family group gathered on the threshold, having arrived without the slightest advance notice via message or telephone. At the forefront stood my elderly parents, my younger sibling Aubrey, her partner Connor. Along with a set of 4 bulky travel cases, they boldly wheeled right into my grand hallway, as though the entire property had always belonged to them without question. They skipped any form of polite inquiry or consent, simply marching forward, unloading their belongings in a casual heap, and claiming seats around my spacious dining setup. Partway through the shared food, Aubrey lifted her gaze with complete ease and stated, "First thing in the morning, I expect the initial meal prepared right at 5 a.m. sharp. Connor awakens at the crack of dawn, and he insists on routines tailored precisely to his preferences. Since you're the one in charge of this estate, Sophia, that responsibility naturally lands on your shoulders, wouldn't you agree?" My folks radiated warm smiles and bobbed their heads in agreement, treating her words as if they were nothing more than a light request for an additional condiment on the side. A surge of tightness gripped my facial muscles, but I managed to mirror a pleasant expression and responded, "Of course, that's perfectly all right with me." I politely withdrew from the gathering, made my way into the adjacent culinary area, and fixed my stare on the antique timepiece hanging prominently on the wall, its steady rhythm marking the passing seconds. 5 o'clock in the early hours. Very well. I adjusted my personal alert to sound at precisely 4 a.m., reached for my mobile gadget, and swiftly placed an order for the most intense fortified dawn revitalization herbal blend available, opting for expedited same-day arrival. They had specifically requested an early morning spread at that hour. I intended to provide them with an unforgettable morning surprise that would linger in their memories for a lifetime. From what spot are you tuning into this tale right now? Go ahead and share your location or region in the discussion section below, and open up about whether any member of your own kin has ever turned up out of nowhere and immediately begun dictating terms as if they were the undisputed rulers of your personal sanctuary. I'm personally going through each and every entry, so please don't hesitate to share your honest experiences without holding anything back. They made absolutely no effort to even feign a request for approval. Aubrey casually set down her high-end designer carry-all directly in the center of the entrance hall, casually removed her casual footwear with a flick, and boldly declared, "Connor and I will be settling into the main sleeping quarters on the eastern wing. That stunning morning light panorama is ideal for supporting his daily wellness practices." My parents proceeded right behind, maneuvering their wheeled luggage with an air of complete normalcy, as if this were a routine occurrence in their lives. My father offered a quick one-armed embrace and casually noted, "We'll go ahead and occupy the Teal visitor accommodation, sweetheart." It was the very same set of rooms they had utilized during our last festive gathering. That last festive gathering, they had stayed for a brief period of several days, completely emptying out my refrigeration unit in the process, while my mother voiced endless dissatisfaction about how uncomfortably rigid the mattress felt beneath her. I deliberately pushed that lingering recollection deep into the back of my mind and summoned up a forced but convincing grin. By the moment we all convened around the meal table, the underlying power structure had already firmly established itself without any room for negotiation. Connor assumed command from the prominent end position of the table, a spot that had traditionally been reserved for my father in past visits. He generously helped himself to a substantial pour from the special Pinot Noir I had carefully set aside for a personal occasion, gave it a dramatic swirl as though he were a longtime resident of the place, and dove straight into a monologue about the escalating real estate valuations around Captiva Island, discussing it with the same casual tone one might use for commenting on daily weather patterns. This specific coastal segment by itself is commanding figures well into the 9-digit range these days, he proclaimed, waving his hand expansively toward the expansive bay view, as if he had personally overseen its development from the ground up. A single holder, entirely free from any outstanding debts, fully cleared following the terms of my separation arrangement. Opportunities like that are exceptionally scarce in today's market. My mother gazed at him with evident admiration beaming across her features. Connor has dedicated countless hours to researching the trends in this area over recent months. According to him, potential buyers are practically lining up and pleading for properties that offer this level of premium waterfront exposure. Aubrey leaned in closer, gently resting her chin against Connor's broad shoulder in a display of affection. We've been pondering this for a while now, dear sibling, seeing how you're navigating through this enormous living space entirely on your own. How about we consider dividing off that southern parcel of land, erect a custom-designed showcase home there, and let Connor take full charge of overseeing the entire sales process? The revenue generated from his professional fees alone could provide a secure financial cushion for our parents that would last them well into their later years without worry. My father nodded with enthusiastic vigor, his eyes lighting up at the prospect. Our pension income is barely sufficient to cover the escalating maintenance fees on the Wisconsin residence anymore. The ongoing rise in living expenses is absolutely crushing us day by day. I carefully set down my eating utensil, feeling a wave of disbelief wash over me. Are you actually proposing that we split up my personal land holdings? Not exactly splitting it up, Connor smoothly interjected with his polished demeanor. Think of it more as a savvy approach to capitalizing on untapped value. You'd still hold on to the core residence structure, preserving all your desired seclusion and independence, while walking away with a substantial 8-figure windfall, even after accounting for all associated costs and deductions. It's a scenario where every party involved comes out ahead with clear benefits. Aubrey stretched her arm across the wide table surface and gently took hold of my hand, squeezing it in a manner reminiscent of our youthful days, when we would confide secrets to one another under the covers. Come on, Soph. Let's think logically about this. Those additional rooms toward the rear of the house sit completely idle most of the time anyway. We could easily transform one of them into a dedicated professional workspace for Connor. Given that he conducts all his business remotely these days, it would make perfect practical sense for us to increase our time spent here on the island. After all, close relatives should prioritize staying connected and supporting one another through life's ups and downs. My mother jumped in to add her perspective with a knowing tone. Your father and I have always pointed out that this grand home far exceeds what any one individual truly requires for comfortable living. Do you recall the day you first acquired it? We cautioned you back then that it bordered on being excessively opulent for your needs. Oh, I remembered that conversation all too vividly. But I also recalled the countless times I had electronically transferred them $4,100 each and every month over the course of the last 12 years, all to ensure they could hold on to their modest home up in the northern states without facing eviction or financial ruin. I remembered covering the full expenses for Aubrey's lavish overseas ceremony in the Bordeaux region, the substantial down payment on her luxury sedan, and even that critical oral surgery procedure she underwent just last winter. Yet none of those generous contributions seemed to hold any weight or relevance in the current conversation unfolding before me. Connor topped off his glass once more and leaned back comfortably in his chair, exuding an air of confidence. Look here, Sophia. I'm not aiming to apply any undue influence or rush you into a decision, but prime chances like this one don't linger around indefinitely waiting for hesitation. As it stands, I already have 3 eager, cash-ready investors from Boston who are actively expressing strong interest. With just one quick communication, we could secure formal interest documents as early as the beginning of next week. My father turned his gaze toward me, his expression carrying that familiar combination of paternal pride mixed with subtle anticipation for compliance. It's not as though you have any young ones lined up to inherit the place someday. It makes far more sense to circulate the prosperity among us all, while we're still healthy enough to fully appreciate and enjoy the fruits of it together. Those words struck me with an impact far more profound than any physical confrontation could ever deliver. No children to pass things down to, no life partner to share the space with. Just me surrounded by 9,000 square feet of serene beachfront solitude that they had suddenly decided they deserved a significant portion of without earning it. I rose from my seat to begin collecting the partially consumed dishes from around the table. I'll give it some serious thought, I replied calmly, though everyone present in the room understood perfectly well that my statement was essentially a polite way of conveying a firm negative. Aubrey let out an audible sigh of frustration, her eyes rolling slightly in exasperation. That's always your go-to line. But then absolutely nothing ever shifts or progresses from there. Connor gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible headshake, the classic marital signal to back off and let the matter rest for now. Instead, he directed a charismatic smile my way, showcasing his impeccably aligned teeth and a veneer of rehearsed sincerity. "There's no need to hurry at all. We've planned to remain here for the next 10 days or so. That gives us plenty of leisurely time to dive deeper into the specifics and crunch all the relevant numbers together." 10 days. They had unilaterally decided on an extended stay without bothering to consult or seek my approval beforehand. I busied myself with loading up the dishwashing machine while they relocated to the comfortable sitting area, already engaging in animated discussions about potential spots for installing a large evergreen tree if they were to make this an annual tradition moving forward. My mother curiously asked whether the outdoor barbecue station was still in proper working order after all these years. My father expressed interest in verifying if the marine elevator mechanism remained fully functional for launching watercraft. Aubrey burst into laughter while envisioning elaborate social events hosted for Connor's network of affluent business contacts. I quietly slipped away through a side exit and followed the winding pathway down toward the sandy shoreline. The incoming waves crashed with a powerful, almost indifferent force against the beach. I lingered there, standing motionless until the chill of the moist sand caused a numbing sensation to spread through my toes and feet. 13 years earlier, I had put my signature on those final dissolution papers inside a sterile meeting room in Miami, channeling every last dollar from my awarded compensation directly into purchasing this villa outright, all because I yearned for a secure haven that no external force could ever wrest away from me again. On this evening, however, it genuinely felt as if the process of losing it had already begun in earnest, piece by piece. When I eventually made my way back inside the home, the upstairs lighting had been extinguished for the night, with the exception of the primary suite they had so boldly commandeered for themselves. Aubrey's soft, muffled chuckles filtered through the thick walls, interspersed with Connor's deeper, resonant replies. The familiar snoring patterns of my parents wafted down from their chosen hallway. I poured a simple glass of cool water for myself, stood gazing at my own shadowy reflection cast against the darkened window pane, and came to a stark realization that twisted my insides with an intensity surpassing any potential effect from a mere herbal concoction. They hadn't come merely as temporary visitors passing through. No, their intentions ran much deeper. They had arrived with the clear aim of establishing a long-term foothold. The wake-up signal blared precisely at 4 a.m. I found myself already fully awake, my heart racing with an adrenaline-fueled intensity I hadn't experienced in quite some time. I slid out from under the covers, wrapped myself in a soft dressing gown, and padded softly down the staircase toward the heart of the home, the kitchen. The entire residence remained enveloped in profound stillness, broken only by the gentle hum emanating from the refrigeration appliance and the rhythmic pounding of ocean waves audible from outside the windows. I began methodically gathering ingredients and tools, approaching the task with the precision of someone managing a high-end morning dining experience for discerning guests. Freshly baked artisan bread sourced from the local artisan shop along the main road was placed into the toasting device, slathered with a rich herb-infused spread. Eggs were carefully lowered into a simmering pot for a soft-cooked finish, timed exactly to 7 minutes for optimal texture. An assortment of vibrant fruits, cherries, cranberries, and pineapple chunks, were artfully arranged on a pristine ceramic serving dish. Freshly squeezed grapefruit nectar filled elegant glasses. The premium African coffee grounds were freshly milled to release their aromatic essence. Then, I carefully unwrapped the compact parcel that had been delivered discreetly the previous afternoon. Advanced strength morning renewal, herbal infusion, intensive internal cleansing composition. The packaging included a discreet warning in small lettering advising against consuming more than a single serving packet per day to avoid potential discomfort. Undeterred, I submerged 7 packets into my largest brewing pot, poured in boiling hot water, and allowed the mixture to infuse deeply until it achieved an inky, opaque hue. The resulting scent was notably sharp and evocative of natural remedies, carrying a hint of earthy potency. Still, I reassured myself internally that it consisted solely of concentrated natural botanicals, posing no real harm beyond their intended effects. By 4:45 a.m., the entire presentation appeared flawlessly arranged and inviting. Crisp, high thread count cloth napkins were neatly folded in an elegant restaurant fashion, with polished utensils perfectly aligned beside each place setting, and the herbal pot positioned unassumingly next to the steaming coffee decanter. Right on cue at 5 a.m. The sound of hurried footsteps descended the stairs in rapid succession. Connor appeared first, his hair still glistening from a recent shower, dressed in athletic gear, as if he held exclusive rights to dictate the rhythm of my daily life. Aubrey followed closely behind, clad in luxurious silk loungewear, letting out an exaggerated yawn to emphasize her leisurely awakening. My parents trailed in last, moving with a slower pace, my mother tightly clutching the edges of her robe, while my father already began voicing mild complaints about the air conditioning system being set too aggressively cool for his liking. Connor took a moment to survey the elaborate spread before him and delivered a single, appreciative clap of his hands. This is precisely the level of hospitality I appreciate. Take a look at this setup, my love. Your sibling has truly outdone herself with this effort. Aubrey gracefully slid into the prominent chair at the table's head, the very spot I typically claim for myself, and proceeded to pour a generous helping of the herbal infusion into her mug without bothering to inquire about its exact composition or origins. It's refreshing to see someone in this household who truly understands the art of proper guest treatment, she remarked casually, taking a deep, satisfying sip. This has a distinctly invigorating taste to it. Excellent work, Sophia. Both of my parents reached eagerly for the pot as well, filling their own cups. My father even cracked a light-hearted joke, saying, "If this keeps things moving smoothly at my stage of life, count me in for regular use." I remained positioned by the central island counter, my arms folded across my chest, silently observing as they consumed the beverage as if it were part of an ordinary morning ritual. Connor went back for thirds on his mug. Aubrey kept commenting on how remarkably alert and vitalized she felt almost immediately. My parents collectively drained the remainder of the pot between them, even requesting extra portions of the perfectly timed eggs to complement it. I offered no verbal input, simply maintaining a serene smile while subtly clearing away a few scattered remnants from the table. 50 minutes later, the initial indication of trouble emerged from Connor, a deep, involuntary groan escaping his lips. He fidgeted uncomfortably in his seat, pressing a palm firmly against his abdomen, and quietly muttered something about unexpected digestive upset. Mere moments afterward, he suddenly stood bolt upright, his face draining of color to a ghostly pallor, and made a frantic dash toward the ground-floor restroom facility. The door closed with such force that it caused the nearby fixtures to vibrate noticeably. Aubrey initially responded with a burst of amusement, teasing him by calling him an overdramatic performer. But then, her own expression shifted dramatically as her eyes widened in alarm. She quickly covered her mouth with one hand, shoved her chair back abruptly, and bolted up the stairs, shouting my name repeatedly as though I had deliberately orchestrated some sort of malicious act against her. My mother exchanged a worried glance with my father. My father returned the look with equal concern. Almost simultaneously, beads of sweat began to form on their foreheads. My mother clutched tightly to the table's edge, whispering urgently, "Victor, I feel something terribly off inside." My father attempted to rise from his chair, but wobbled unsteadily and collapsed back down with a heavy thud. The unmistakable sounds emanating from both restroom areas filled the air, relentless flushing of toilets, doors opening and closing repeatedly in haste. Someone, most likely Aubrey, bellowed out, "What in the world did you include in that herbal drink?" I calmly retrieved my phone and initiated a call to emergency services, maintaining a composed and steady voice throughout. "Yes, hello there. I have a pair of older adults currently experiencing intense abdominal discomfort, along with signs of severe dehydration. It could be related to a food sensitivity or reaction. We require immediate medical assistance." I provided the exact location details, ended the call, and turned to address my parents directly. "Please stay put and remain as calm as possible. Professional help is on its way and will arrive shortly." The emergency response vehicle pulled up in less than 9 minutes, its flashing lights casting erratic patterns across the driveway surface. A team of 2 trained paramedics burst through the door carrying essential equipment, including a portable stretcher. They quickly assessed the situation, taking in my mother's curled-up posture as she held her stomach in pain and my father's doubled-over position on the nearby sofa, and immediately sprang into coordinated action. They administered intravenous hydration lines, monitored vital signs closely, and provided comprehensive supportive care. Soon after, they carefully loaded my parents onto the transport and sped away with the sirens activated, piercing the early morning quiet. Connor and Aubrey weren't far behind, hastily departing in Connor's high-end utility vehicle. I stood at the front entrance, watching as they accelerated down the road, with Aubrey leaning partially out of the passenger side, her complexion taking on a sickly green tint. Later that same morning, the attending physician from the emergency department reached out to me directly via phone. Your family members have stabilized, although they are dealing with extreme fluid loss and considerable intestinal upset. They all ingested the same potent natural cleansing herbal mixture, is that correct? I affirmed the details. Yes, that's accurate. I believed it to be nothing more than a robust wellness blend designed for daily use. She let out a weary sigh over the line. Madam, steeping 7 packets in a single batch essentially amounts to an overdose of laxative properties. They'll need to stay on intravenous support for the majority of the day to recover properly, but rest assured, they will make a full recovery without lasting issues. I expressed my sincere thanks for the update, disconnected the call, and found myself standing alone in the now eerily silent home. The remnants of the morning meal still cluttered the table surface. The brewing pot sat completely empty, its contents fully consumed. For the very first time since their unexpected arrival, a genuine smile spread across my face, unforced and authentic. As the final emergency vehicle departed and the front door clicked shut behind it, the villa descended into a profound tranquility that I hadn't experienced in what felt like an eternity. No overlapping conversations, no echoing footsteps across the floors, no incessant demands filling the air, just the subtle whir of the climate control system and the distant, soothing roll of waves lapping against the shore. I made my way directly to the spare bedroom that Connor and Aubrey had so presumptuously occupied. His sleek, dark leather travel bag remained partially open on the low bench at the foot of the bed, its contents haphazardly spilling out in the chaos of their hurried exit to seek medical attention. I paused for a brief moment of hesitation, then lowered myself to my knees and began systematically removing item after item. Buried beneath a neatly stacked pile of casual polo shirts lay a thick, official-looking envelope, secured tightly with a sturdy rubber band. My full name was inscribed on the label in bold, precise lettering, S. Bennett, Captiva Island. My heartbeat accelerated dramatically, pounding so forcefully that I could feel the pulse echoing in my throat. Inside the envelope were dozens upon dozens of printed photographs depicting my villa from various angles. Some appeared to have been captured from a boat out on the water, others from public roadways, and a few even through the glass windows under cover of night. The oldest image bore a digital timestamp dating back 20 months earlier, 20 months of surveillance. He had been monitoring this property long before Aubrey ever casually mentioned the idea of introducing him to the family or bringing him for a visit. Following the photos came a pre-notarized power of attorney document, which granted Connor Vance unrestricted authority to handle the listing and sale of my entire estate without further input. At the bottom of the page sat my parents' signatures, rendered in their distinctive, slightly wavering handwriting, dated 5 months prior to this moment. I immediately recognized my mother's elaborate swirling capital letter and my father's more compact, angular style. They had willingly signed over control of my home without ever breathing a word of it to me directly. Accompanying that was a complete formation package for a New Jersey limited liability company named Gulf Prestige Estates LLC, listing Connor as the sole managing member with full operational control. Then there was a detailed spreadsheet printout labeled Completed Deals Over Last 6 Years, featuring 30 rows of data, each representing a separate property transaction involving 30 distinct elderly property owners. The column titles read like a calculated blueprint for exploitation. Owner name, age bracket, estimated net worth, marital situation, documented heirs. My own details had already been entered into row 31, marked as an active case. My hands trembled uncontrollably, nearly causing me to drop the entire bundle. Tucked away in a rear sleeve was a solitary business card, with a handwritten contact number scrawled on the reverse side. The front bore the name Isabella Grant, Destin, Florida. That name triggered a vague memory. Aubrey had once offhandedly mentioned Connor's problematic ex-partner, who had accused him of unlawfully taking possession of her family home. I had brushed it off as mere drama at the time without giving it much thought. Without further delay, I dialed the number on my phone before I could second-guess the decision. She picked up after just one ring. "Hello, Isabella. This is Sophia Bennett. I'm Aubrey Vance's older sibling. I believe it's important that we have a conversation about Connor." There was an extended silence on the other end, followed by a sharp, embittered laugh that carried years of resentment. "So, you've discovered that incriminating envelope, have you?" 25 minutes later, I was armed with the full, harrowing story. Connor had entered Isabella's life 7 years ago, showering her with overwhelming attention and affection for a solid 7 months, convincing her to take out a new mortgage on her debt-free home to fund what he pitched as a joint real estate flip opportunity, only to vanish completely the very day the loan funds were dispersed into their shared account. She ended up losing not only the house, but also her entire life savings, and she came perilously close to facing criminal charges herself when the lending institution initiated foreclosure proceedings. She had preserved all the original police filings, the forged property transfer document bearing her mimicked signature, and the comprehensive trail of financial records. During our call, she emailed the entire set of documents to me for review. I pressed her on whether there were additional victims beyond her case. She provided yet another name without hesitation: Beatrice Lawson, 84 years old, residing in Destin. Once again, Beatrice answered her phone on the very first ring, her voice carrying a mix of frailty and sharp intelligence honed by experience. Connor had smoothly persuaded her to sell off her cherished lifelong residence at a mere fraction of its true market value, under the guise of assisting her transition into a luxurious senior living community that promised comfort and care. Of course, that promised community turned out to be nothing more than a fabricated illusion. Now, she resided in a government-subsidized nursing home, possessing little more than a single weathered suitcase of personal belongings. Tears welled up in her voice as I described the similar envelope I had uncovered. Within moments, she sent over digital copies of the fraudulent sales contract for my examination. I meticulously photographed every single page of Connor's envelope from front to back, uploaded the complete collection to a highly secure online storage platform, and then forwarded duplicates to my trusted estate lawyer based in Fort Myers, using a subject line that read, "Urgent. Suspected fraud involving family members." I included contact information for both Isabella and Beatrice, urging him to engage any relevant law enforcement connections he might have at his disposal. Following that, I accessed the concealed safe embedded behind a discreet wall panel in my home office closet, carefully placed the original envelope inside for safekeeping, and twisted the combination dial to lock it securely. No matter what developments unfolded next, the critical evidence was now protected beyond reach. I descended the stairs once more and positioned myself in the center of the living area, my eyes fixed on the sofa where my parents had been comfortably seated just hours earlier, casually sipping the herbal brew and exchanging smiles as if the world were perfectly aligned. They had knowingly signed away my hard-earned sanctuary. My mother, who still made a point to call me every weekend without fail to gently remind me about maintaining a balanced diet with plenty of fresh produce. My father, who had shed genuine tears of gratitude when I cleared their home loan 12 years ago, lifting that financial burden from their shoulders. They had sat across from me the previous night, casually chatting about equitably sharing wealth, all while Connor held the very tool they had used to orchestrate this betrayal behind my back. The depth of the disloyalty struck me with a force that overshadowed any initial anger, feeling like an invisible hand clenching around my heart, making it difficult to draw a full breath. With unsteady hands, I poured myself another glass of water and stood at the kitchen island, my gaze lingering on the scattered remains of the morning meal still strewn across the table. The empty herbal pot sat there, looking deceptively harmless in the soft light. One thing crystallized in my mind with absolute certainty. When they all inevitably returned through that front door, the dynamics would shift irreversibly, and this time, I would be fully prepared to face whatever came my way. The entrance bell chimed once again as the sun dipped low behind the bay horizon, painting the sky in vivid shades of deep crimson and fiery amber. I opened the door to reveal my older brother Landon, still wearing his rugged work boots from his job in Austin, with a sturdy duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a fierce determination etched into his features. He stepped across the threshold without waiting for a formal invitation. "What on earth is going on here, Sophia?" Mother's been on the line in hysterics, claiming you attempted to poison the entire group with some toxic brew. Father's voice is so weak he can barely string words together. Aubrey's insisting that you've completely lost your senses. I caught the earliest available flight down here. You need to start explaining everything right now. I closed the door firmly behind him and directed his attention toward the kitchen island counter. Take a seat over there. You're going to want to review this material before you jump to any conclusions about who's acting irrationally in this situation. He dropped his bag to the floor with a thud, crossed his arms defensively, and leaned back against the counter edge, his posture indicating he was braced for a heated confrontation. I powered up my laptop computer, rotated the screen to face him directly, and navigated to the first digital folder. The images loaded in sequence, one after another. Detailed shots of my villa captured from every conceivable angle. Drone aerial views, infrared night captures, even some taken from the nearby sand dunes across the street. The timestamps on the files began as far back as 20 months ago. Landon's brow furrowed in confusion. Who was responsible for taking all these photographs? Keep scrolling through. The next folder contained the power of attorney paperwork. My parents' signatures were plainly visible, authenticated and dated 5 months earlier. The notary seal originated from a commercial shipping center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His facial expression shifted dramatically. That's definitely Mother's distinctive handwriting style. I clicked forward without pause. Screen captures of text message exchanges between Connor and my mother appeared. Connor's message: just have them sign at the marked arrows. Sophia will stay in the dark until the deal is sealed and everyone's financially secure. Mother's reply: she won't even realize the money's gone. She has more than enough to spare as it is. Landon's jawline tightened visibly, a sign of growing tension. I didn't let up, opening an audio recording file I had retrieved from Mother's online backup storage. She still had no idea I retained access privileges. Her voice came through clearly, though slightly tinny from the recording quality. After the property closes, we'll divide it evenly. The woman lives by herself. All that extra space is unnecessary for one person. We raised her to be more generous than this selfish behavior. He stared intently at the screen for an extended period, absorbing the implications. I allowed the heavy silence to hang in the air between us. Finally, he rubbed his hand across his face in a gesture of disbelief and whispered under his breath, "My God, this can't be real." I proceeded to open the final folder, revealing the comprehensive spreadsheet with 30 names listed, along with corresponding ages, net worth estimates, and a dedicated column labeled Status Closed. My own name occupied row 31, with the notation In Progress beside it. Landon looked as though he had been physically struck, his color draining. This amounts to outright fraud, specifically targeting seniors. That's a federal-level crime with serious consequences. I nodded in agreement. Isabella Grant already lost her entire home in Destin because of him. Beatrice Lawson is 84 and now confined to a Medicaid-supported facility solely due to his schemes. I have sworn statements from both women ready to go. He stood up abruptly, paced over to the large window overlooking the water, and stared out at the fading light reflecting off the waves. Mother and father actually put their names on that document. They did indeed. And they understood enough of what they were doing to go through with it. He turned back toward me, his eyes glistening with unshed emotion. I've been sending them financial support every month as well, Soph. Not quite as much as what you've contributed, but still a significant amount over time. And all along, they were plotting to strip your home right out from under you without a second thought. I chose not to respond verbally, as words weren't necessary. The truth spoke for itself. Landon walked back over, pulling me into a tight, protective hug that caused my bones to protest slightly from the pressure. I'm so sorry for this. I came down here fully prepared to confront you harshly, and it turns out I'm the one who's been completely blind. This ends right here, tonight. We sat back down together, and I guided him through the entire collection of evidence once more, this time at a slower pace to allow him to read and process every single line in detail. When he reached the conclusion of Isabella's official police report, he slammed the laptop lid shut with force and declared firmly, "We need to contact the authorities immediately. No more delays." I already had the standard non-emergency line for the Fort Myers County Sheriff's Department displayed on my screen. Landon took the device from my hands and pressed the call button without hesitation. He placed the call on speaker mode for transparency. The detective who answered listened attentively for a full 2 minutes, posed 4 pointed questions to clarify key details, and then responded decisively. "Do not move from your location. I'm dispatching 2 patrol units right away and initiating the process for an emergency search authorization. Refrain from handling any additional items in that bag to preserve evidence." 50 minutes later, a pair of deputies accompanied by a seasoned detective were standing in my living room, ready to proceed. Landon took the lead in explaining the situation, while I simply handed over a portable external drive containing every photograph, scanned document, and audio recording, all meticulously time-stamped and backed up in multiple copies for redundancy. The detective methodically scrolled through the compiled evidence, his expression growing increasingly stern with each passing page. "This body of material more than satisfies the requirements for establishing probable cause," he stated matter-of-factly. "I have a good relationship with the on-call judge, even on a weekend evening like this. The warrant should be approved and in hand within the next hour or so." While we awaited the official authorization, Landon and I conducted a thorough walkthrough of the villa together, activating each and every security camera I had installed discreetly following my divorce, a fact I had never shared with anyone else until now. There were 13 units in total, strategically placed at the main entrance, rear exit, all major hallways, the home office, the attached garage, and even extending out to the private dock area. We configured the system to send silent alerts and provide a direct live feed to the sheriff's central dispatch center. Landon personally tested the motion detection sensors by moving in and out of their fields of view repeatedly until confirmation arrived via the detective's mobile device. The search warrant had been officially granted. Connor Vance was now designated as a person of interest in ongoing investigations spanning multiple states. The detective addressed both of us with a serious tone. "If he attempts to return to the premises this evening, do not attempt to interact or confront him directly. Allow our team to manage the situation professionally." Landon gave a curt nod of understanding. "We'll be keeping a close watch on the monitoring feeds from here." The deputies positioned themselves strategically outside the property, blending into the surroundings. Landon brewed a pot of coffee that we barely touched, our focus elsewhere. We settled side by side in the dimly lit home office, the glowing screens displaying live views of empty corridors and rooms. For the first time since this ordeal began with their unannounced arrival, I no longer felt isolated within the walls of my own home, and for the first time in many years, I had the unwavering support of my big brother restored. The office monitoring screen flashed a silent red alert at exactly 2:19 a.m., a single pulsing notification. Moments later, the rear hallway camera feed captured the back door slowly creaking open. A dark-clad figure slipped inside stealthily, wearing a low-pulled baseball cap and what appeared to be thin latex gloves that faintly reflected the dim glow from a nearby nightlight. It was unmistakably Connor. Landon and I froze in our seats, holding our breath. 5 deputies, fully equipped with protective vests, emerged silently from their concealed positions in an adjacent guest room and took up tactical stances without making a sound. On the screen, Connor navigated the interior with eerie familiarity, carefully avoiding every known creaky spot on the flooring, sticking closely to shadowed areas, and heading directly toward the upstairs level. The camera mounted outside my home office door recorded him inserting a duplicate key, likely Aubrey's spare, into the lock mechanism. The door opened with a barely audible click. He entered the room, closed the door behind him softly, and made a beeline for the built-in bookshelf. His gloved hands located the hidden access panel in mere seconds. He clearly knew its exact location. He had probably observed me interacting with it through a window during one of his prior surveillance efforts months earlier. Kneeling down, he retrieved a compact crowbar from his backpack and began attempting to force the safe's combination dial. The safe emitted a single error beep indicating an incorrect entry. He muttered a quiet curse under his breath and tried a different sequence. That was the precise moment when the door to the adjoining closet burst open. "Police! Hands in the air where we can see them. Right now." 5 red laser dots suddenly appeared, centered on his chest from the officer's weapons. Connor immediately dropped the crowbar, raised both arms high in surrender, and turned around slowly to face them. The room's overhead light switched on abruptly, flooding the space and temporarily blinding him. Landon stood framed in the doorway just behind the line of deputies, his arms firmly crossed, staring down the man who had married our younger sister with a look of cold resolve. Connor's mouth opened and closed several times in rapid succession, like a fish gasping for air. This is all just a big misunderstanding. I only came back to collect my personal belongings that I left behind. One of the deputies swiftly spun him around, conducted a thorough pat-down search, and secured handcuffs around his wrists, while another recited his legal rights in a clear, methodical voice. The backpack lay unzipped on the floor beside him. Inside, the officers discovered a loaded handgun with its serial number meticulously filed off, 3 disposable burner phones, a bulky envelope stuffed with cash, a counterfeit Texas driver's license issued under the alias Caleb Reed, and a small USB storage drive clearly labeled Primary Database. The detective held up the USB drive pinched between 2 fingers, examining it closely. 30 victims documented so far, and likely more to uncover, Mr. Vance. Add to that charges for attempted burglary, possession of an unregistered firearm, and whatever additional crimes this device reveals upon examination. Connor attempted to deploy his signature charming smile that had previously won over my parents so effectively. Officers, please understand. My wife's family owns this property outright. I have every legal right to be here. Save that explanation for the courtroom, the lead deputy interjected sharply. We have a fully executed search warrant in hand, along with live video footage capturing your unauthorized entry in the dead of night at 2 a.m. Your game is over. They escorted him past me in the hallway, and for a fleeting half-second, our eyes locked. There was no trace of remorse in his gaze, only cold, calculating assessment. Then he was led down the stairs and into the rear of a waiting patrol cruiser, the vehicle's red and blue lights casting eerie shadows across the surrounding palm trees. Landon closed and locked the front door after the last officer departed, leaning his back against it for support. He actually believed he could just sneak back in under cover of darkness and erase all traces of his scheme without consequence. I let out a long, steady exhale, feeling as though I had been holding my breath for hours on end. He came dangerously close to succeeding. The detective remained on site to carefully catalog and bag all recovered evidence. He secured the USB drive, connected it to his specialized secure laptop, and let out a low, impressed whistle. It's encrypted, but our tech team will break through it soon enough. The initial scan already shows the complete files on 30 cases, plus detailed financial transactions, routed through 5 separate offshore banking accounts. He had arrangements in place to flee to Playa del Carmen by tomorrow evening, complete with a forged passport, a one-way flight ticket, and all the necessary preparations. Landon shook his head in disbelief. Just how long had mother and father been complicit in this plan? Long enough to put their signatures on those papers and keep it hidden, I replied, my voice coming out flat and devoid of emotion, even to my own ears. The detective sealed the backpack, affixed an official evidence label, and provided me with a detailed receipt itemizing every confiscated object. We'll need formal statements from both of you at the station later today, but for now, you're safe to remain here overnight. Patrol units will continue circling the neighborhood until daybreak as a precaution. After the team finally left, Landon and I found ourselves back in the kitchen, with the lights turned low to match the late hour. We poured the neglected coffee at last, though we sipped it slowly. A prolonged silence stretched between us before he broke it. I can't stop thinking back to the holiday celebration 4 years ago. Connor took charge of carving the main dish, spinning that yarn about sealing a $12 million business deal, and Mother looked at him as if he were some kind of hero who could do no wrong. I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. We all did, to some extent. I stared down into my mug, swirling the liquid absent-mindedly. I was the one who paid for that entire feast, down to the last detail. Landon reached across the island and placed his hand over mine in a gesture of solidarity. But not anymore. We sat there together as the sky outside gradually lightened to a soft gray, listening to the calls of seabirds and the occasional rumble of a passing patrol vehicle. The villa felt transformed in a subtle way, lighter, more open, as if a lingering toxic presence had been thoroughly cleansed by the fresh sea breeze. By the break of dawn, Connor was securely placed in a holding cell. The illegal handgun charge alone carried a mandatory 6-year federal sentence. The contents of the USB drive added 30 counts of interstate wire fraud and senior exploitation across 5 different states. The phony identification and large cash stash made him an obvious flight risk, ensuring that bail was summarily denied before the morning meal could even be considered. Landon stretched his limbs, cracked his neck to relieve tension, and offered me a weary but genuine grin. Feeling any hunger yet? I'm pretty handy with making a solid breakfast scramble. I came close to letting out a real laugh for the first time in days. Close, but not quite. How about we order delivery from that spot down by the harbor instead? It'll be on me this time. He nodded in understanding, grasping all the unspoken emotions swirling beneath the surface. Outside the windows, the sun rose steadily over the bay, casting a bright, purifying light that evoked the fresh clarity following the passage of a fierce storm. The front door swung open shortly after 9 a.m. My mother entered first, her face pale and drawn, clinging to her handbag as if it were the only stable thing left in her world. My father followed closely, his movements deliberate and labored, his eyes fixed firmly on the floor to avoid meeting anyone's gaze. Aubrey brought up the rear, her face swollen and blotchy from either prolonged crying or seething anger. It was difficult to distinguish at this point. They came to an abrupt halt in the kitchen doorway upon spotting Landon and me already positioned at the island, calmly waiting. Through the window, the locksmith service van was clearly visible, parked prominently in the driveway. My mother was the first to speak, her voice quivering with uncertainty. "Darling, we really must have a serious discussion about all this. Connor's been arrested over what must be some horrible mix-up or error. You have the power to set this right. He's part of the family now, after all." My father nodded weakly in support. "The investigator mentioned that you provided them with certain documents. All you need to do is explain that it was a simple mistake on everyone's part. We can all head down to the station together and sort it out properly." Aubrey stepped forward aggressively, her arms crossed tightly across her chest in a defensive posture. "You owe us at least that much, Sophia. You owe us for the medical expenses we've incurred, a heartfelt apology to my husband for this ordeal, and you need to withdraw every single charge immediately. This whole situation is utterly ridiculous and out of control." I remained perfectly still, unmoving from my seat. Landon stayed silent beside me, deferring the lead to me for the moment. I slid my phone across the smooth marble surface and pressed the play button on a prepared audio file. My mother's own voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "Once the transaction finalizes, we'll split the proceeds 50-50. She lives all by herself. She won't even notice until everything's wrapped up." Another clip played immediately after. Connor's text to my father. "Have Eleanor sign on pages 2 and 7. Tell her it's just standard paperwork. Sophia has complete trust in you both." One more segment followed. My mother again, captured from her personal cloud storage, laughing lightly. "After we cash in, we can finally make that move to New Mexico for retirement, just like we've always dreamed. Aubrey will get her fair portion too, of course." The blood seemed to drain from my mother's face, leaving her even paler than before. My father gripped the back of a nearby chair for support, his knuckles turning white. Aubrey's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no words emerged. I let the weight of the silence settle over the room like a heavy blanket. My mother recovered her voice first, though it came out small and pleading. "We were in such deep trouble, my dear. The home back in Wisconsin is completely upside down financially. We took out home equity loans, maxed out credit cards, and racked up massive medical bills we couldn't pay. Connor assured us he could turn things around for good. He promised that a share from the property sale would resolve all our problems once and for all." My father added his input in a voice barely above a whisper. "We never imagined you'd discover any of this until the deal was done, and we were all safely on the other side." Aubrey finally erupted in a burst of emotion. "Are you seriously going through with this right now? Choosing complete strangers over your own flesh and blood? Connor is rotting in a jail cell because you overreacted hysterically to a simple cup of tea." I looked directly at her, truly seeing her for what felt like the first time in a long while. "That tea is what ultimately saved my home from your schemes, Aubrey. And even now, you fail to grasp the full gravity of what's happened here." My mother began sobbing more intensely, her shoulders shaking. "You've always had it all handed to you, Sophia. The generous divorce settlement, this luxurious estate, no children to raise or support. We're left with absolutely nothing. You can't possibly turn your back on us in our time of need." I rose slowly from my seat, my movements deliberate. "For the past 12 years, I've wired you $4,100 every single month without fail. That adds up to over $590,000 in total support. I covered the costs for your extravagant wedding ceremony, your high-end vehicle purchase, your fertility treatments that sadly didn't succeed. I paid for Father's emergency bypass surgery, Mother's luxury vacations, and I never once asked for so much as a thank you in return. But now, I'm drawing the line. I'm done. My father tried one more appeal. Families are supposed to forgive one another, honey. We made a terrible mistake in judgment. We're getting old. We were terrified of losing everything." Aubrey snarled bitterly. "You're absolutely disgusting. Do you really think throwing money around makes you superior to the rest of us?" Landon finally spoke up, his voice low but edged with steel. "No. She thinks that betrayal comes with real, lasting consequences. And she's absolutely right in that belief." My mother reached out desperately for my hand. I pulled away firmly, creating distance. I looked at each of them in turn, meeting their eyes steadily. "You signed away my home without remorse. You conspired to strip away everything I rebuilt after my painful divorce, leaving me with nothing to show for my efforts. You've shown me the true meaning of what family can become at its worst." Aubrey let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "So that's how it is then. You're just tossing us out like yesterday's garbage." "Yes," I replied simply. "As of this moment, I no longer have parents in my life. I no longer have a sister. You are now nothing more than strangers who once shared my family name." My mother collapsed heavily into the nearest chair, her sobs turning into deep, wrenching cries. My father stood there, his mouth working silently as if trying to form words that wouldn't come. Aubrey began ranting loudly about pursuing legal action and vowing to ruin lives, but her words blurred into an indistinguishable background noise. I picked up my phone and dialed the locksmith who was already waiting patiently outside. "You can begin the work now. Change every lock, every gate mechanism, every access code. I want it all completed by early afternoon." The technician entered carrying his toolkit, ready to start. My mother's crying escalated into loud wails of despair. Aubrey lunged forward in my direction. Landon stepped effortlessly between us, blocking her path. My father made one final, desperate attempt, his voice cracking with emotion. "Sophia, please reconsider." I met his gaze head-on and felt an unexpected emptiness inside. "Goodbye, Victor." They lingered in the space for another 12 minutes or so while the locksmith worked diligently in the background, the sounds of metal grinding and new keys being cut filling the air. My mother continued her pleas. Aubrey persisted with her curses and threats. My father kept repeating my name over and over, as if repetition alone could bridge the chasm between us. When the final new deadbolt slid into place with a satisfying click, Landon opened the front door wide, allowing bright sunlight to flood into the entryway. I spoke one last time, my tone calm and resolute. "Your luggage has been gathered in the hallway. The rideshare vehicle I arranged is waiting outside. It will transport you to the Fort Myers airport. I've covered the cost of one-way tickets back to Milwaukee. From there, you're entirely on your own to figure things out." My mother made a final attempt to embrace me. I stepped back out of reach. Aubrey spat defiantly on the floor as she stormed past. My father paused on the threshold, his entire body trembling, but he never turned to look back. Landon closed the door firmly behind them, engaged the new lock, and activated the updated security system. The villa returned to its natural state of quiet once more. A deeper, more profound quiet this time, free from underlying tension. I released a long, slow breath, and for the first time in my adult years, I faced the future without a trace of fear or uncertainty. 7 months later, the villa no longer resembled the same space it once was. I had all the existing furniture removed entirely and replaced with fresh pieces. Light, airy sofas upholstered in soft linen the shade of gentle sea mist, smooth maple flooring that gleamed underfoot, and sleek quartz countertops that reflected the natural light like calm waters. I tore down the outdated heavy curtains, allowing the full expanse of the bay to stream in through unobstructed glass. Along the front pathway, I planted a triple row of delicate white blossom shrubs that flowered so abundantly that the evening air carried a sweet, sugary fragrance reminiscent of fresh confections. The door locks were all updated on the very day they departed. The security setup was elevated to top-tier professional standards, complete with advanced features. The monthly $4,100 transfers to the Wisconsin bank account ceased immediately upon confirmation of their final clearance. I never received even a single note of gratitude for the more than $590,000 I had provided over those 12 years. At this point, I no longer held any expectation for one. Connor's court sentencing dominated local news coverage for a full week. 20 years behind bars in a federal facility, 14 for systematic financial exploitation of seniors across state lines, 5 for sophisticated wire fraud schemes, and 1 additional for attempting to tamper with a key witness after he tried to offer a bribe to Isabella Grant directly from his jail cell. The presiding judge described it as one of the most meticulously planned predatory operations he had encountered in his 25 years on the bench. No eligibility for parole until after serving at least 17 years. He's 42 now. He'll be pushing 60 by the time he's eligible for release. Aubrey lost virtually everything in the wave of civil lawsuits that followed in the wake of the criminal proceedings. The financial institutions pursued the co-signed loans Connor had fraudulently obtained using her name as collateral. Her premium sports car was repossessed right in the middle of a busy shopping center parking lot while she was inside gathering supplies. The upscale apartment in Naples entered foreclosure proceedings swiftly. She now resides in a modest studio unit off a major thoroughfare in Miami, where she works scanning purchases at a large retail chain and relies on public transportation after her driving privileges were suspended due to accumulated unpaid violations. My parents were forced to sell their cozy bungalow in Milwaukee for far less than the outstanding debts owed against it. The home equity line and various credit accounts consumed any remaining value whole. They relocated to a subsidized senior housing complex on the outskirts of Green Bay. 2 cramped rooms with paper-thin walls and a basic electric hot plate serving as their only cooking appliance. Their Social Security checks and assistance programs barely keep the utilities running. This year, no holiday card arrived from Mother as it had in the past. Landon makes the trip south every few weeks now. We fire up the grill for hearty meals, share bottles of fine wine well into the evening, and deliberately avoid any mention of those who once occupied seats at our table. I still enjoy my morning coffee from the same comfortable lounge chair oriented toward the western view, but the entire scene feels renewed and vibrant. The sunsets paint the sky in the same brilliant hues of orange and red. The same flocks of birds soar gracefully over the waters, but the heavy weight that once pressed on my chest has lifted completely. On some quiet evenings, I sit with a simple notepad and pen, drafting letters that I never intend to send, one expressing deep appreciation to Isabella for her bravery in speaking out first and breaking the cycle. Another to Beatrice Lawson, informing her that the Victim Restitution Fund has finally disbursed payments. One more to the dedicated detective who sacrificed his weekend time to ensure my safety throughout the process. At times, I reflect on the concept of family and how peculiar it is that the term can encompass both those who nurtured you from birth and those who later attempt to undermine and destroy what you've built. I once held the belief that blood ties demanded unconditional forgiveness, no matter the offense. I've since learned a harder truth. Severing those toxic connections wasn't an act of cruelty on my part. It was a necessary surgical intervention to preserve my well-being. The blossoms are bursting forth in full splendor once again. I walk the pathway each morning without shoes, allowing the cool dew to refresh my feet as I go. The villa remains peaceful, fully owned and paid for, truly mine in every meaningful sense. I have companions who choose to spend time here of their own volition, a brother who elects to stand by my side, and a future that I now have the freedom to shape entirely according to my own vision. If you're listening to this and find yourself in a situation where someone close keeps chipping away at your essence under the guise of love or familial duty, please hear my words clearly. Establishing firm boundaries isn't an act of betrayal. Safeguarding your inner peace isn't selfishness. Sometimes the most compassionate choice you can make for your own life is to firmly close the door, replace the locks, and allow the blossoms to overgrow the old paths they once trod. Because genuine family doesn't seize your sanctuary to rectify their own poor choices. True family doesn't require lessons in understanding that you are not merely their fallback financial safety net. I held on to my home. I released the burden of guilt. And for the first time in 55 years, I am precisely where I am meant to be, whole and unapologetic.